So good morning, everyone. I am Dante Ang, the President and CEO of the Manila Times. I'm joined this morning by my colleague Divine De La Cruz, our reporter at the House of Representatives. And our guest today is the Managing Director of COCOPEA. We've had him here before. COCOPEA, as you know, is the Coordinating Council of Private Educational Associations. Attorney Estrada is also the Executive Director of POPSCO, which is one of the member organizations of COCOPEA. POPSCO is the Philippine Association of Private Schools, Colleges, and Universities. And before we start, I should disclose that I am treasurer of POPSCO and therefore also a board member of COCOPEA. But we invited Attorney Estrada today to get from him an update on the private educational sector, which, as you know, has been impacted, like everything else in our society, by the pandemic. Good morning, Attorney Estrada.
Good morning, Dante, and good morning to everyone joining us this morning.
Yes, I think to start us off, Divine, you want to ask your questions first? Ladies first.
Hi, good morning, sir.
Morning.
Well, yeah, as we've known, sir, the private schools or even the whole education sector had been the most affected by the pandemic. Could you tell us what is the status of the private sectors right now, and probably give us some statistics of those who are still open and what support do you need from the government as well?
Okay, so I'd like to cite some data released by the government through the Department of Education. So, according to the Department of Education, around 800 schools closed because of the pandemic, only for this school year, around 800. And there's a decline in the enrollment in basic education, almost 50%. So around 2 million students in the private schools did not enroll. Hindi sila nag-enroll this school year. And 400,000 transferred to the public school system. So that's the big picture now. Of course, we did our own survey, and the status is if this will continue, no, the trend continues by this coming school year, then we will see more students displaced, more schools to close. No, that's why this is a very critical period. No, this in preparation for reopening, no, and starting the next school year.
Attorney Estrada, you mentioned 400,000 students transferred from the private sector to the public. Are there any statistics available on the number of students who did not enroll at all and just ended up dropping for this year? Is that available?
Merong from the data from the DepEd, meron silang unaccounted, no? So million din yun, almost that 2 million. If they're not counting the 400 that is now part of the enrollment in the public school system, then around 2 million din yung unaccounted. So we don't know kung saan sila, kung nag-enroll ba sila o hindi. So probably hindi nga nakapagpatuloy.
Wow, terrible. Divine, you have a follow-up?
Sir, could you probably tell us kung ano yung mga primary factors why, of course, the enrollment dropped and why some students transferred to public schools?
Well, the primary reason there is really the economic impact on the families. No? Parents losing jobs, no, losing business, closing businesses. So sila yung naapektuhan. And as we all know, schools are fully tuition funded. No, they rely on tuition payments. No, so kung hindi nag-enroll ang karamihan, marami talaga magsasara. No, and kaya naman hindi nakakapag-enroll dahil nga maraming natigil sa trabaho, maraming nagsarang negosyo, and that's why we all need government intervention, economic number one, and of course policy interventions para makabalik na tayo sa siguro at least near normal economic activity so that the parents can also support their kids' education. And of course, in turn, they support the sustainability of the private education institutions.
Attorney, is there talk about, or maybe concern among the COCOPEA about the long-term impact of these closures and this troubling number of unaccounted students, presumably dropping out altogether for, maybe for a year? What's the long-term impact? People have tossed phrases like lost generation. Is that an exaggeration, or is that an accurate description of what is happening right now?
Yeah, in COCOPEA, we were able to access international studies, international examples, also studies here locally on many aspects and impact of the pandemic on education. You mentioned about education losses, no? Yung prolonged online learning, merong ano yan, merong regression yan sa mga bata. And we all know merong ano yan, effect on the mental health, social issues ng mga bata. Yung prolonged closure din or suspension of education, whether it's online or face-to-face, meron din yung ano, impact dun sa education gains, no? Yung natutunan nila the last time they attended school, halos nawala na yon, and it equates to losses. 70% na lang, no? Nung nagbukas tayo ng yung mga schools na nagbukas ng August last year, based on data, international data rin naman ito, no? Using some proxy statistics, then around 70% na lang daw ang na-retain, no? So it's really alarming. And yun ang number one concern natin, no, as educators, yung effects sa learners. And now we're looking at the effect of a prolonged online, no, implementation, both on the, as I've said, social aspect and the mental aspect. Kasi may social divide din, di ba? Ngayon, nakikita natin, those who can afford to go online, may mga laptops, they are in a better position than those who do not have. So definitely, if we open face-to-face, it will improve access for everyone.
Right. You mentioned before we had this interview today that there was supposed to be a hearing in Congress, and there's also been pressure on the palace, I think, to have pilot areas where they, pilot areas for face-to-face sessions. Maybe what have you been hearing? What is the latest? Because we know what the president said, that he's reluctant to open schools across the country, unless there's I guess more people vaccinated. But what's the latest that you are hearing?
Last Wednesday, there's a hearing at the Senate, but the night before that, Tuesday, the Senate adopted a resolution endorsing to the president the reopening of some schools in the public school system, around 1,600 of them, to face-to-face classes. Gusto nilang simulan na i-pilot na yung face-to-face. So they endorsed that. And in the hearing on Wednesday, that's the direction. No? The primary framework is that hindi naman lahat ng regions pare-pareho yung
right.
Yung cases. Some have zero, no, for the longest time. So may mga schools doon, baka pwedeng doon simulan. But of course, that's the major framework. Pero marami pa tayong dapat i-consider. No? Yun ang lumabas doon sa hearing. No? Because different age groups, no, they have different social contacts, and therefore different din yung exposure nila, no, likely exposure to the virus. So magkakaiba din yan ng control measures, no, kung sakaling bubuksan natin. No? So simply put, iba yung senior high, pag-aalaga mo sa senior high, iba yung pag-aalaga mo sa the younger ones. Those who take the public transport, those who do not, no, those areas where there's a substantial distance between the schools and the community. Iba yung rural, iba yung urban. Napakahaba pang usapan talaga, and we only have a few months left, no, before the start of another school year.
Right. So before we get to the start of the school year, what is COCOPEA's position? What is the opinion of COCOPEA? What is safe to open at this point, where the number of cases seems to be consistent or leveled off, no? And then we have, of course, 2 vaccines now that have arrived. Of course, they're very few in number, pero at this point, what can the government consider in terms of reopening or face-to-face sessions? What would be safe, in your opinion?
Yeah. there's really no silver bullet, no, that will
Okay.
address all situations. But we can learn. But for COCOPEA, for us, we can learn from international examples. As
Okay.
early as June last year, we've been presenting that scenario, no, to our legislators. Ano ba yung ginagawa sa ibang bansa, no? Especially our
Right.
ASEAN neighbors, no? So
Best practices.
yeah, so ang takeaways doon sa mga ginagawa sa ibang bansa, it is not really the closure of the schools, no, that control the transmission. It is the sustained social distancing, health
Right.
protocols. Yun, that makes really the difference. So walang masyadong difference yung total closure and the strict observance of social distancing and all of the health protocols. Pareho lang ang effect noon. In fact, may
Okay.
mga countries na they remain closed pero tumataas, no? Steady yung pagtaas. Because again, the lack of the health protocols and safety measures, as opposed to those who open pero strict social distancing, etc. So because of that and what we have so far gathered from international examples, no, we proposed some rules, no, na pwedeng i-consider ng government natin should they allow the reopening. Yung when we leave it to the president and to the IATF, but preparation knows no time. We should prepare, no, as early as possible. So meron kaming mga pinropose like yung cyclical shifts, no,
Okay.
based yan sa mga international best practices. Yung students report only 4 days in campus, and then 4 days straight yan, and then 10 days straight online or remote sa bahay sila. So because
Okay.
of the 14-day period incubation, tapos merong 3 to 4 days kasi na latency yung virus, meaning kapag daw
Right.
ikaw ay
Exposed.
na-expose ka, or sabi mong talagang nahawa ka na, merong gap na 3 to 4 days bago talaga yun mag-manifest. So by the time it manifests, sa bata, for example, sa bahay na siya. So, but many things need to be considered. Resurgence, liability,
Right.
structural changes, retrofitting, we see in the malls, in establishments, may mga acrylic yung tables, etc. You can imagine the same thing being done in schools. No? So all of these things are being talked about, and we are part of that discussion.
Right. What are you seeing from other countries in terms of what's allowable? Because we're talking about the recommendations you made. I know my nephew, for instance, he's in college already, and but he's studying abroad. But despite the spikes in cases, I've seen in some countries, at least college students have been allowed, as you said, with mandating masks and distancing and all of those other precautions. And I've heard even from U.S. reports that I think they said that I think something like grade 8 yata ba yan, is that it should be okay. Of course, the problem there are the teachers union, the different concern altogether. But it seems to be that the CDC was saying that for certain age groups of students, it's already safe to have face-to-face.
Right, that's correct. Ang naging default understanding, I think, for everyone is that the older the students are, then the safer. No, they are the less likely they are going to transmit or contract the virus. Kaya ang pinag-uusapan, let's start with the college. Let's start with those graduating. But eventually, especially in the US, no, studies show that there's really less evidence, no, on the younger students, no, having the high risk of transmission than the older ones. So I think their pediatric society, and nagsalita na rin yung ating Philippine Pediatric Society diyan, no, in one of
Right.
the forums sponsored also by COCOPEA. So it's
Right.
not really, and they they have less exposure to seniors, no, to adults kapag nasa school sila. And totoo rin 'yon. Kaya lang I think ang importanteng consideration is yung hindi naman sa school makukuha 'yon probably, no, but public transport, no, when
Right.
you go
Right.
out, no. So all of this should be also considered.
Wasn't there a decision earlier to allow certain medical students? Is that, if, can you correct me if I'm wrong? Or wasn't there a decision to allow them to have face to face, or was this only for their on the job training, or did this pertain also to classroom instruction?
So right now, it's only for the OJT internship and
I
practicum
see.
on the allied health, medicine, and health programs. No? So, yung nursing, midwifery, pharmacy. So, yung mga programs na yan, bakit sila lang? Una, they're
Exactly.
frontliners.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, need them. We need more of them. No? Moving forward, and then they'll take the board exams. They need to take the board exams soon, and yung kanilang on-the-job training or practicum internship would require actual cases. Hindi pwedeng online, no? So, 'di ba? They are into saving people's lives. They need to, 'di ba, to be trained in actual cases. So,
It can be
kailangan
theoretical. Yeah.
yeah, so hindi kayang theoretical. That's the main consideration. But I think dahan-dahan, CHED is laying down the foundation for the guidelines to allow on a limited basis. No? Other programs also for college students to so slowly or gradually report to their campuses.
Right. Are you being consulted? Is COCOPEA being consulted by IATF? Are you part of the discussion in making recommendations on what policies to issue? Do you have the
Yeah,
opportunity to give inputs? Ano?
yeah, it's a subcommittee in the IATF. Sa kanila, it's really more policy level, mataas na. But there's a subgroup at the IATF, and several occasions we were able naman to present. And yun na nga, it translated to actual policies. Yung naging CHED and DOH guidelines, it's actually malaki ang participation ng private sector. Two of our member universities piloted around December yata in last year. They showed if ever they open the campuses anong itsura. So and then it's like an R&D, research and development model. It's pilot in one. No? It
Right.
was visited by Secretary Galvez. He joined the visit. Chairman De Vera also. So we're taking a role in all of this.
Right. Divine, I think you have some follow-up questions.
Just to follow up with regard to face-to-face
Mm.
learning. Sir, you've mentioned a while ago na preparation really has no time. So, kailangan mag-prepare na the soonest possible. So, I would like to know kung ano na po yung mga ginagawa ng private school like right now. For example, from consultations, making recommendations, or maybe rehearsing how it would be.
Yeah, as of now, syempre ang pwede lang namin talaga magawa is to empower our members in finding ways to secure the health and safety of our students. Should the executive, should our president and the IATF allow the reopening. So we participate in putting together guidelines, making sure na the sector is really heard kasi yung mga kami mismo, yung mga school presidents, yung talagang school administrators, they know what's happening on the ground. So that's what we're doing now. Again, hindi lang ngayon, as early as June last year, bago pa nag-open yung online classes, we already engaged the government at different levels on this matter. And sa private schools kasi, mas sila mas they have the agility, they can easily adapt. Halimbawa sinabi mag-open na tayo next school year, schools can easily decide kasi because they decide individually yung sa government although isa lang decision maker, iba-iba ang sitwasyon and ilan ang estudyante sa public school system. So we are in a better position to cope. Ang problem lang is again the resources to do it. So we really need government.
Well, Attorney, sorry, you said you need help. Can you give us an update also on the government interventions, the programs that were meant to help the education sector? Uh, are you feeling the assistance? Do you need more? What is the status now?
Malaking tulong yung Bayanihan 2, just signed by the President last year, insofar as not only extending the state of pandemic, state of calamity, but insofar as education, yung mga provisions of assistance to students in the private sector, yung assistance sa ating mga teachers na and school personnel na na-displace or nawalan ng trabaho. Yung assistance to students from basic ed yan to college. Of course, limited yung resources, 600 million lang yung naalat, and we understand, no? Because government also cannot strain its resources for other important services like health, no? But we're very happy with that. Nakatulong naman ng malaki. Maraming na tulungan na eskwelahan na hindi nagsara, no? Although the help is not directly on the schools, pero diretso naman sa estudyante, and the students were able to use it to pay the schools for their fees, and yung assistance to teachers and school personnel, malaking tulong na rin yon kasi nakabawas doon sa burden ng mga schools, no, to cover the compensation, no, of all the teachers. So yan, that's number one, the bayanihan. And then by the way, yung sa bayanihan pala, yung sa college assistance for the college students in higher ed, na-implement na yan, no, ni Chairman De Vera ng CHED. Around 54,000 ang beneficiaries, 5,000 each. Maliit na amount pero malaki ang narating nun. Malayo ang narating, no? The 5,000 also, 5 to 8,000 assistance to displaced faculty or yung mga nabawasan din ng sweldo na tanggap na rin nila. And ang problem na lang, ongoing pa, yung sa basic ed. No? Sa basic education, around 60,000 ang tinitan na beneficiaries na students at 5,000 each. Pero wala pa, hindi pa ito na roll out. No? Marami pang inaasikaso siguro yung ating department. But hopefully forthcoming na rin yan. And then another intervention, yung GSIS, mayroon silang loan program for their members with dependents, no, studying in the private colleges and universities. And then Land Bank, I also read in the news, no, couple of days ago, meron silang loans extended to students, no. And then yung CREATE bill, no, yung ating tax reform, yung batas na mag-amend sa ating tax code for schools, I think because of Senator Recto, Senator Angara, and the other authors, they pushed for the reduction of the rate of taxes, income taxes for the proprietary schools from 10% to 1%. So, inintay na lang din yan mapirmahan ng presidente so that the private schools would be able to enjoy that, no, in the next 3 years, fiscal years. And but we continue to engage government to look for other interventions, yung tulong sa connection, no, Wi-Fi, internet, no, so assistance to teachers also. All forms of assistance, we're trying to explore that also.
Well, what about those 800 or so schools you said that have closed? I mean, can government do something to help them recover and perhaps reopen later on?
Yeah, different levels of assistance. Pwede pa yan. I'm also trying to locate yung 800 na ito. Like for example, if they're foundations and non-stock non-profit, eventually ang magtutuloy nun gobyerno eh. Diba? Or unless foundation din ang sumalo. But yeah, yun ang ano ngayon, we're trying to locate them. The private sector also is reaching out to some of these 800 schools. Baka pwedeng i-adapt ng iba. Kasi yung palagay ko dun sa 800 na yun, meron pa dyan talagang hindi pa talaga close, but they're already included in
the suspended operations.
Yeah, and they're already included in the counting. Kasi process naman yun eh. May a certain period ka pa you have to observe for the employees, etc. So, until talaga hindi pa sila totally closed, there's still time. There's still, help can still be extended to
Yeah.
them. Mm.
Can you help people understand the situation? Because sometimes there is a perception and people think that if a school is private, that it is cash rich, that it is wealthy. Pero, from my understanding, it's certainly true for some well-known schools here in Metro Manila, but probably not the same for schools, especially in more remote areas of the country. Maybe can you elaborate on that?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. O nako, napakalaking bagay niyan, no? Kasi when we talk about private education, we don't speak on behalf of the small portion na malalaking universities, no? Dito sa Metro Manila and other metropolitan areas. We speak more on behalf of the community schools, mga private schools that serve their community kasi walang mga public schools doon or hindi enough, no? Nagsisiksikan. So maraming mga mission driven schools, maraming established by people in the community, no? Because they wanted to help. And hindi ito, no, it's not a business, no, generally for them, because most of them are non-stock, non-profit, and even if you are for profit, no, what you make probably would just go back to the institution itself, no, and it's overregulated, no, because of the social aspect, no, of delivering the education service. It's really, of course, highly regulated. You cannot just raise fees to realize revenues. Meron kang ano diyan, you have to deal with parents. You cannot price your fees too high. Walang mag-enroll sa'yo. It's not like that. No? Na you just increase fees so that you increase profit. And then 70% of what is collected by schools, they go to employees. No? It is mandated to be in the form of salaries and incentives. And 20% for facilities, for resources. Eh, lalo na ngayon, you need online, all of these things. But
Right,
probably
you need to
20%.
invest.
Yeah. So yun ang ano natin, we speak for them. Sila yung kasi in terms of government resources, talagang kailangan talaga ng private, because again it's tuition driven ang operation ng private schools eh. Except for those amounts that I've mentioned earlier na assistance, but generally it is they derive their resources from tuition payments, not from
Yeah.
government funding.
I know what you mean. As you know, we have the Manila Times College, and I'm sad to share with you that the Manila campus has closed. So we're consolidating everything in our campus in Subic, only because that has also basic education. So we're able to have more students there. But I wonder if the Manila Times College Manila campus is among those 800 that has been counted already as among the casualties of the pandemic. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is sometimes there is parang a portrayal of private education as an adversary of government, when in fact the Constitution clearly spells out that there should be complementarity between private and public. What would be the impact if the private sector education would collapse? What would be the implication there for not only on the economic side but maybe on the development side?
Yeah. Education is both a social and an economic driver. And in the Philippines, our education system is composed of two sectors. We have one system, but composed of two sectors, the public and the private. And as you have said, the Constitution says there should be complementary roles between them. It cannot be just public, it cannot just be private. And it is explained um, in the citing academic innovation, creativity in the private sector, no? So that the public education system can also benefit from that. The research that is initiated in the private sector. So lahat yan, no, it should complement, no, both sectors should complement each other. Now, what's happening now, no, even prior to the pandemic, but I think this is also the trend now because of the pandemic, is that there's this crowding out of the private schools, no?
Mhm.
Mostly driven by the free education or near free education in the public school system. So there's that di ba, that tilt, no, heavy tilt towards the public school system. Parents now are constrained to go to where it is free, no, but it can't also, the government cannot also sustain that for a long time, kasi ang tendency niyan kung lahat ay lilipat sa public school system, it will also strain government resources.
Overload the system.
Yeah, it will also affect the quality of education that it can deliver. No, so it needs the private education sector, and many studies also that we have initiated and we have access to that show that in terms of cost efficiency and effectivity, it is wiser. It's also wise, or it is also wise for government to invest in private education, no? Because it's again, it's lesser in cost, and there's a higher rate of return in terms of the quality of graduates, in terms of ano rin, no, statistics of those who are able to graduate. So malaki yung rate of return when government invests in private education.
Follow up lang ulit, babalikan ko lang sir, yung you were mentioning about the assistance that you've received na po from Bayanihan 2 and other laws that were enacted
Great,
previously.
yeah.
As I remember po yung sa private schools before, yung usapan po sa house is that private schools would also benefit dun sa SMEs assistance. Is this also part of it? And then House is now crafting yung Bayanihan 3. What other assistance would private schools need? And also, siguro baka maging kasama na rin po dun yung sa resources in terms of reopening. Like for example, kailangan po talaga dyan ng funding dun sa resources na kailangan like staff and also yung physical structure din po ng opening ng classes. Could you give us more information on this, sir?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to go back dun sa una nung bayanihan, and then the economic recovery bills were introduced even prior to bayanihan 2. Ang problema dun sa bayanihan 1, the education sector, yung private schools, parang naging odd sila na hindi alam kung saan ba magpo-fall ang private schools. Sa businesses, small and medium enterprises, saan sila pupunta? Kasi ang nangyari diyan, when the bayanihan, through the bayanihan, the government extended assistance. Yung camp, for example, the Dole camp, hindi nakapag-benefit doon ang mga teachers and school personnel sa private schools, yung unang round. Kasi nga, nadi-disqualify ang schools, hindi sila bumabagsak doon sa category ng beneficiary institutions. And then the schools were asked to go to the DOF, yung small and medium assistance for small and medium enterprise. Hindi rin daw pumasa. So naman yon, naagapan ng ating mga legislators, ating mga congressmen especially. Kaya dun sa bayanihan 2, through also the efforts of COCOPEA, we were able to put in there provisions that are specific assistance to private sector. Not the private institutions, the students, number 1, students, and then the teachers. Again, limited budget. Pero, so ngayon, moving into Bayanihan 3, we're just hoping na higher budgets allocated for these programs. Hindi bago, but just ngayon, 600 million for both basic ed and higher ed. Of course, if we increase that to siguro mas malaki pa, billions, mas maraming matutulungan na estudyante. But moving towards recovery and all of these discussions, ang palagay ko na taking off from the discussion in the Senate, ang isa pang i-explore namin, how the private schools can be empowered to assume the costs and the liabilities in case of face-to-face reopening for students who will get the virus. Kasi ito kahit sabi mo sundin natin lahat ng guidelines, it's really not an assurance. We need to assume certain responsibilities for students. Yung immediate response, hospitalization, isolation. You can just imagine sa isang school, merong merong certain portion ng estudyante makakontract ng virus, who will be made liable? As I've said, the resources of schools galing sa tuition eh. Should we pass this to yung insurance, i-cover natin sila. Sana natin kukunin yun. Merong proposal sa PhilHealth din, etc. So, yung discussion nandyan. No? Not only for operation, but also taking care of our members of the academy, students, teachers, personnel, for their yung well-being nila, no? Safety and security nila from the virus. Because we're starting to reopen eh. So we need government economic intervention on that.
Sir, i-clarify ko lang po yung sa Bayanihan 1 and 2, sa Bayanihan 2, mostly ang may benefit lang po is the students and yung teachers. But the schools themselves, hindi po nakasama doon sa assistance.
Yeah, kasi it becomes complicated, no? Pagka what would the schools need the money for? 'Di ba? For rin naman 'yun eh. Ang pangailangan nila noon at hanggang ngayon ay resources to pay salaries, 'di ba? Resources to continue to deliver the education programs. And how are they able to do that from tuition payments? Wala nang pambayad. So, diretso na yung assistance sa estudyante so that they are also able to pay their schools or choose their schools. Di ba? So, diretso na sa kanila and it's less complication and the help is directly given to this to the students and to the school personnel. Merong mga doon, like merong for loans, mga ganyan, di ba? Low interest loans. In general, hindi lang schools. Of course, the schools are able to avail of that. Yung mga kailangan ng mga bridge financing. Of course, tulong din sa kanila yon.
Speaking of assistance to students, what happened to the voucher program? Because some of that was also for additional expenses, right? Like for school materials, maybe the cost of transportation to school. What's the update?
For the higher education, yung tertiary education subsidy, of course, malaki ang yan. Marami ang natulungan. It's really a big help, no? But and of course we asked for for an increase in slots in budget, so more students may receive the assistance. Pero dun sa basic education, kahit merong assistance, marami pa rin ang estudyante na hindi nag-avail ng assistance because they cannot also shoulder the other costs. No, kasi dun sa like sa ESC and senior high, fixed yon, pero may other related costs pa eh. Baka marami talaga tayong mga pamilya and estudyante na kahit may assistance na from government, yung idadagdag nila doon probably yun na nga, pang load, pamasahe, pagkain pa,
Right.
lahat ng kailangan, no? So hindi pa rin kinaya. So may mga unutilized doon na sayang. So but yun namang assistance din. So inopen sa other levels, hindi lang sa grade 7 at that time. So minaximize naman yung use of that subsidy from the government. But it should also be a footnote, no? Tingnan natin na talagang sometimes the help should also, di ba, should be meaningful to some, more meaningful to some. Hindi na talaga kaya na fixed for everyone. You should try to target really the beneficiaries and those who are most in need.
All right. Speaking of students' concerns, it's March already, and people are many students are thinking about summer vacation already. And then there was something in the news recently that I think maybe there may not be summer school, or there may be a shortened summer break for some students. And I think this is understandable for public schools because they started late. But private schools started earlier. What's the status with the private sector? Are you going to have a summer break?
Yeah. Alam mo, I just want to go back, no? Yung before the start of the school year last, kung natatandaan niyo, pinospone yung opening. Naging August, and then August 24, naging October 5. During that time, I was Yun ang position ng COCOPEA. Let's not delay the opening. Kung gagawin namang online, let's allow schools to open earlier so that the next school year will not be affected and the summer break will not be affected. No? Sabi naman nun, kaya pa yan, i-overtime ng Saturday, etc. So, because of the COCOPEA intervention, napayagan po yung mga private schools na magbukas earlier than the public schools. No? So, karamihan earlier than August, but most August nagbukas last year. And just following the 10-month, no, the normal school operation, kahit hindi yung shortened, but the 10-month will end in May. So, and if they open in August this year, meron pang 2 months na vacation. So, yun naman ang isang that's the good thing about planning. So, I would say naman for most of the private schools, the students would be able to enjoy a summer break. Not only the students, but also the teachers. Kailangan talaga ng break eh. Hindi pwedeng wala. Oo.
Yeah. And what are you looking forward to in terms of the next academic year, June onwards, right? As I said earlier, vaccines are just now arriving. There's still very few of them. I'm not sure when the majority of the population will get their inoculations. There's concern that the virus will linger. Even the president has said that things may not be normal probably till 2023 or something like that. But what would be ideal for the sector, and then what would be the implication if we continue face-to-face in the new academic year?
Yeah, we're actually bracing for worst case scenarios if the trend continues on the decline in enrollment, the closure of the schools. That's why we really need government help, no? Not only in terms of economic intervention, but also policy-wise. No? Policy intervention meaning less regulatory, more supportive, no? Allowing the schools to innovate so that they can maximize their resources in delivering education. Itong next school year, in terms of performance, no, in delivering education in remote modes, no, online, palagay ko, syempre, magaling na yung mga schools, especially the private schools, na master na siguro nila yan. Ma-address na nila yung mga gaps and they can improve on many things moving into the new school year. Ang problem na lang is yung unutilized resources, no, or less use of all of the sayang, no? We have the human resources, we have the facilities, walang nag-enroll, no? So that is really where government help comes in. And kahit meron ng face-to-face, ako ang isang nakikita ko, as a parents pa rin yan eh. It will still diba, go down to that decision making of the parents, and without the confidence, no, that level of confidence on the parents, baliwala din. No? Pero at least nandiyan yung access. They can choose to send their kids to school in campus, but we need to do a better job in convincing them. At again, malaking bagay yung pilot testing. No? The entire country is looking and watching, no? Anong magiging ganyan, no? Moving forward.
Right.
Do you think conditions have been better? Mas marami po ba yung schools na magbubukas ngayong school year po? May projections na po ba tayo?
Yung aming kasing survey, no, it's what are their plans, no, or hanggang saan aabutin ng resources. Ang mga tinitingnan ng schools diyan na milestone, syempre yung enrollment, yung admission period, no. So marami diyan umaasa na mag-improve yung enrollment or they would have enough, no, to sustain their operations. Pero ang I'd like to connect that opening also to the delayed yung ending ng mga public school system. As I've said, may mga private schools that support government program delivery of education. So yung nag-implement ng vouchers, nag-implement ng ESC, yung estudyante nila, halimbawa yung nasa grade 7, galing yun sa public schools eh. Kasi walang assistance sa sa elementary, no? Free yan eh. They go to DepEd schools. Pero yung mga parents na naghihintay lang na makagraduate ng elementary anak nila at ililipat na sa private, no? Yan ang may malaking epekto doon sa delay ng ending. Why? Because if the public schools end in July, 'di ba? Tapos ang mga private schools ay magbubukas ng mas maaga or mas maaga sila nagtapos, matagal yung break, mahaba yung break, malaking resources kakainin 'yon, no? And kung abutan sila ng opening, hindi na makakapag-enroll yung mga galing sa public schools sa mga private schools. So diretso na sila sa public school system. Maraming magsasara na naman, no? Because of that. So hopefully itong mga loose ends na to ay ma-address yung mga gaps in policy.
And also, sir, can you explain to us? Kasi, of course, what I think is that mas marami yung schools na open, even private schools, mas maraming options for students as well. And it would be better to manage social distancing in case we reopen to schools. Is this also your position as well?
Alam mo, depende talaga kung papaano natin masusustain yung mga rules na yon with discipline, 'di ba? Yung social distancing, 1 meter ang minimum, no? That's being discussed, 1 meter ba, 1.5 or 2 meter. It will have an effect, no, sa capacity ng mga estudyante sa schools, ilang shifts. Siyempre, yung use of face mask, face shields, yung sanitation, 'di ba? Lahat yan, yung ability ng school, these are just the minimum, 'di ba? But lahat ng mga health protocols, yung ability ng schools, no, in certain areas and regions, it will really now be the test, no, on whether the campuses will be safe, on whether face to face is really the option now, no, better option than the online. Kasi kahit sabi mo sa areas na zero ngayon, hindi mo masabi pag nagbukas yan baka biglang mag-surge, no? And one more thing, local government really plays a very important role dun sa opening ng schools na yan, because they provide support to their constituents in general. Yung ability to respond to emergencies or resurgence, no, of the of cases. Anong gagawin ng local government? Anong support? May mga lugar na nagpo-provide ng shuttle, for example, service ng local government sa teachers, no? At sa mga, they also plan to do it for students. So marami talagang factors, pero ang ano diyan talaga, definitely science should be the should be considered. Hindi lang yung geographic areas, hindi lang yung number of cases, mapping, hindi lang 'yon. There should really be a science involved here, no, in terms of yung risks sa mga age groups, no, at dapat talagang basehan nito is really more on the science, on should play a major role in the decision whether to open or not.
And also, last na lang po, sir, what is your stand in prioritizing the vaccination also of teachers and other education workers po? And
Well, yeah,
private
sorry.
schools would also procure po ba?
Para sa amin kasi ang teachers, no, whether public or private, they should be considered frontliners. They should be in the top priority then. No? And especially because we said that schools will remain closed unless we, diba, we have the vaccines. Andito na yung vaccine. Laging huli yung yung school sa pagpubukas or pag-consider, no? So ito naman sana sa vaccine, we're hoping na mabigyan sila ng priority if supply is an issue. Kung makikita mo yung priority, nandoon naman ang teachers, number 6 yata ang teachers. Tapos number 8 yung other school personnel. Pero mauna yung seniors, indigents, no? But we're hoping na mabigyan ng priority yung mga nasa schools. Kasi frontliners sila and we rely on them in preparing the schools for opening. Yung mga estudyante yata hindi pa sila pwedeng, yung sa mga vaccines yata, it's not allowed for minors. Oo. Tsaka ano daw sila, they have enough antigens daw to protect, no? Assuming they don't socialize with with adults. They're more protected. So ngayon, yung mga schools to procure their own, we tried that. Kaya lang pinaliwanag naman din sa atin na hindi pa pwedeng dumiretso. Government lahat ng procurement. So we have to follow that also.
Or do you think teachers will get vaccinated once the vaccines are available? What's your sense ba? Are they willing to get shots?
Hindi ko pa masabi in general, pero maraming yung on condition na if they're being required to report,
I see.
they should get vaccinated. Yun ang ano nila, they should have that also. Pero I think yung the sentiment is general, parang nasa wait and see, ikaw muna.
Right.
So magpapa-vaccine. And of course, mukhang tumataas na rin naman ang level of confidence. Ngayon dumadating na yung mga vaccines.
Yeah, well, let's hope for the best. Thank you for your time, Attorney Estrada. Any parting words? Any other points you want to make? Maybe there's something we forgot to ask. A final message from you.
I just want to thank the Manila Times for giving this platform to COCOPEA and to the private education in general, and we are able to present our issues also in a less formal, in a less regulatory environment. We are able naman to present our issues, different levels of the government. I attend congressional hearings, Senate hearings. But of course, sa laki ng sector,
Yeah.
the private sector is just a small portion, kumbaga. But the issues are the same. I would say there should be no dichotomy. I always say that there should be no dichotomy in terms of issues for our teachers. It should not. We should not distinguish whether it's public or private, and whether it's private or public education. Our state should be able to support education because it is a public service, and the private sector should be encouraged more to participate in this public service. So, maraming salamat ulit sa inyo.
Attorney, as you said, it's a good investment, and it earns a return to the country, and I wish you well, and I wish the entire private sector education well as well. Thank you for your time, and keep in touch so that we can get the latest from you.
Yes, definitely I'll do that. Maraming salamat. Thank you.
Thank you.